In this video, I'm going to be covering my complete high poly to low poly workflow for creating video game assets. What's going on, you 3D modeling beast? This is JL Mussi, and in today's video, I'm going to be covering my complete high poly to low poly modeling and texturing workflow for creating video game assets, more specifically video game textures. This is not going to be a full specific tutorial on how to do one thing. I think I cover that a lot in this channel and I have a lot of content around that. This is going to be stepping back a little bit and looking pretty much at a general workflow. And this is going to answer the question about high poly and low poly modeling. In high poly to low poly workflow is a question that I get asked a lot in my channel. I do a lot of sub-D modeling and I get a lot of subscribers, just a lot of comments in the comment section asking me how would you actually create a video game asset from this. And this is exactly what I'll be showing you, where I take my sub-D model, my high poly model in Maya, and I actually do a variety of setups, even creating ID maps, and all that prepares me to then take that into Substance Painter, create a map that essentially takes a look at the high res, compares it to the low res, which is the game model, and then creates a normal map. And that normal map, that initial normal map, is pretty much my base where I continue to layer and texture and add effects to ultimately give me a finished texture set that is going to be applied to a low poly asset, which is then going to be taken into Unity. And this is a asset that I worked on. It's actually a skin for a game called Ultimate Golf. I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this video. You're going to see how you could still do sub-D modeling, kind of a high poly, high fidelity workflow, and then take that mesh into a package like Substance Painter and actually bake out those maps, extract the high poly information, and still have a game engine friendly asset. Before we get started, I have two quick announcements. One is that I'm actually doing a free trial for a limited time for my Maya hard surface modeling course, and you could access that course for free using the link down below. And then secondly, I want to give a huge shout out to the people in this list right here. These are people that actually helped a friend of mine that was taking care of his mother, and he had set up a GoFundMe. So huge shout out and huge thank you for helping a fellow artist from the bottom of my heart and really just helping make an impact in his life. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. So I'm starting my project here with a sphere. No surprise there, since this is a golf ball. I am making this a little bit more dense than my low poly mesh, the low poly mesh that the client sent, and that's eventually going to be taken into Unity and also be used as the base within Substance Painter. So here with this higher res that I'm working on, I'm essentially just really concerned about the panel line. So everywhere that I have a panel line within this medicine ball design, this is where I'm going to have an edge. Eventually those edges are going to get beveled, and that beveling is going to give me width to be able to basically extrude out and thus create my final panel lines. In this part, I'm actually working on this first corner piece of this panel. Since it has pretty much this rounded corner, I'm working out the topology so I could get a nice rounded corner. This little pop-up here for the mirror tool, this is a script, part of Malcom's mega script pack. This specific utility is just the mirroring utility. I find it really, really useful. And it works a little bit better than the native Maya mirroring tool. And like I said, this is part of Malcom's Mega Pack, which is an awesome set of Maya modeling and UV scripts. It's definitely helped me speed up my modeling workflow. So if you want to check those out, I'll include a link in the description down below. Here, I'm pretty much just adding topology, pretty much where those panel lines are going to be. I am using the edge slide constraint within the modeling toolkit. Anytime that I add topology and I need to slide that around the surface, I will use the edge constraint. At this point of the modeling process, I'm looking to do my initial extrusions. So once I carve in all the details, I'll select all the faces that need to be pushed down at one time. I'll go ahead and do an extrude, just extrude that inward, and that way I can start getting some thickness to my model. From this point, I'm going through and deleting pretty much all these faces that are left behind. Anytime that you extrude inward and you're working with symmetry lines, you have to go back and pretty much gut out those faces that the extrude initially creates. I'm also using bevels as a way of adding holding edges. The last bit of unique detail that I'm modeling here is of this center cap here. And this is pretty much the same, just taking faces that need to be pushed down, extruding in, adding bevels as holding edges. Stepping back from this, I am looking to create this pretty much like I would anything with radial symmetry. This has 3 radial symmetry axes, and this is something that I talk about in my YouTube videos and also cover extensively in my Maya hard surface modeling course. But radial symmetry does happen a lot in hard surface models. And so my initial goal here is just to finish a third of this model, even though I'm kind of working in this main sphere. I'll eventually be cutting this off. So I have a clean third, which then I can use my radial symmetry workflow to get the other 2/3 and have a finished model with those 3 lines of radial symmetry. So here you'll see me apply different materials to different faces. And the reason I'm doing this is to create a mask ID within Substance Painter. So I'll save this file out and I'll be able to actually source this material grouping within Substance Painter. And Substance Painter is going to look at these different material IDs and it's going to create a mask ID. And once we go into Substance Painter, you'll see how easy it's going to be to actually create our different masks that are going to break up our materials within Substance Painter. So the great thing about this is whether you're using Maya, Modo, Max, or Blender, it's really easy to actually select faces at a relatively medium res mesh here, right? And apply different materials to then have Painter create this ID map for you. Instead of going in there and having to have a brush and paint and break this up. So it's exponentially easier to do this at this stage with a lower to medium res mesh, selecting polygons, assigning materials, right? Than to actually go in Substance Painter and have to do this with a brush, right? In my opinion, it's a lot easier and a lot cleaner. So now that I'm done modeling the high res version in Maya, it's time to actually export that into Substance Painter. And you'll note that I'm actually converting the sub-D preview in Maya. And basically what that's going to do is just kind of bake in that smooth resolution so I can export it to Substance Painter and actually use this version as the high res to bake the normal map details from. So right now we're in Substance Painter. I loaded everything up. I have the low res mesh. This is the game res mesh that's eventually going to be taken into Unity. And then I'm also exporting or importing that high-res mesh that I exported out of Maya to be pretty much my high-definition meshes. So Substance is going to look at the low-res and also the high-res, compare those differences, and spit out a normal map. And this is pretty much the detail that you see. Once I have that normal map created, I will also basically create all the other maps based off the normal map. So essentially what you'll see is Substance Painter create things like the occlusion map, the curvature map, position, thickness, whatever I've clicked on based on that normal map. So at this point, you'll see my initial material breakup that I'm doing with my color ID map. This basically entails me breaking up each material, adding a black mask, and then you see that I'm doing adding a color selection. And then that color selection, basically, I can just pick whatever color that I want, and it's going to assign a white value, thus masking out that section of the color pretty much for my material ID map that initially was generated from those Maya materials. So at this point, I finished the block out for my textures. I'm not looking to push this too much further. Just like I do block outs for my modeling, I also do block outs for my textures. So at this point, this is a good time to stop, take some renders, and submit this to a client for approval. So when you're working in a freelance environment, you don't want to get carried away and add too many details. Take this almost to a finalized texture set, because if revisions come back or changes come back, this is a lot of time that you wasted on your end, and it's also time that you wasted from the client, and you're kind of getting further away from your deadline, right? So you want to treat these as milestones and have kind of these incremental checkoffs, especially when you initially block out your textures. So I'm starting to introduce some text here. Substance Painter does have pretty much this font tool with a limited selection of fonts, right? And you could actually just go in there, edit it, and put whatever. If you have a real specific font, you would actually have to go into a package like Photoshop and pretty much just either create a target and bring that in to a fill layer. But, you know, Substance does have just kind of initial set or limited set of fonts that you can use. So once you have that in there, what I like to do is kind of roughen that up a little bit, where I'll go ahead and just add a paint layer. And that paint layer, I'm able to select a black color, right? And kind of chip away. So I'll have something with an alpha, like a dirt alpha. And I'm able to just kind of chip away at the font, giving it this nice weathered look. One side note about this project is that the UVs were already set for the low poly mesh. You had different artists working on different skins for this same asset. So typically when that happens, your UV layout does not change. Thus, I didn't really have to lay out any UVs for this particular model. So here we have all the iterations that I did, all the back and forths with the client, and all the approvals that happened along the way. Keep in mind, anytime that you're working for a production, it is a iterative process. So you'll give one iteration, and from that point, the art leads will come back to you and have suggested tweaks. So over time, small changes add up to the final asset. So this is a final skin that actually made it into the game, into Unity. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of 3D Modeling Explained, where I take your 3D modeling questions and try to answer them to the best of my abilities. As always, smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, and keep it locked here to this channel for more Maya 3D modeling tutorials and also more Substance Painter tutorials as well. So that's all the time that I have for you. Until we meet again, folks, I will catch you next time.